I mean, I know you're very nice, but who was like the most difficult guest star or just came with like the whole entourage diva, like, oh God, why is this person here? Like there
We
has to be
didn't
some
have.
people that came in and caused trouble.
What's funny is Roseanne wasn't going to put up with you causing trouble. Like, she was pretty direct, and she'd say, we don't do stuff like that here, or like. And our guests, we really tried hard. It's not like people were there for weeks and weeks and weeks. People, especially big stars, came in for a couple days, and we maximized their time, made them comfortable, and we worked. And that part was always super professional. Because I think that's also when you're working with a legend, you don't want to be the place that you don't want to be their bad story. And so
Yeah.
for the most part, they were good. There were a couple times I had friends on the show, DJ's friends. Sometimes that's an example when you asked me before about parents who like kind of force their kids into stuff. A few of those, without saying any names, like the parents wanted to be difficult. The parents wanted to ask for things or demand things and be what is considered a set parent. And that was so opposite of who Lecy and Sara and my parents were. That kind of rubbed a
Yeah.
lot of people the wrong way.
And they're not, I mean, you or Lecy or Sara, they're not like a main cast member. You would think be the opposite.
Well, I think sometimes people think they have to behave badly to get attention or to justify that they're worth it.
Huh.
And I think that's true in life, but it's particularly true in our business sometimes. And I think that's
That's
one of those
true.
things where you're almost like trying to assert that you belong. And anytime you walk into an environment and you want to tell everybody how much you belong, it just kind of highlights you might not be so comfortable or belong.
Right. It's like, okay, your insecurity is just now shining through.
Right.
How was Leonardo DiCaprio?
It's funny. That was one of Sarah's buddies, right? So like our perception of like Leonardo DiCaprio or Tobey Maguire or all these people, like it's swayed because that was just one of her friends. And like when Johnny came in and became her friend, like Johnny just fit. Johnny felt like family. Same thing with Glenn Quinn. Like they just were part of us.
I could see that. I could see that. So yes. Morgan Fairchild and Sandra Bernhard, two of my favorites.
I'm Morgan Fairchild. We had this group of television classic moms too when we did the 50s episode, that the candid conversations they had that we couldn't play that I wish could have made it on television, because they all kind of talked about their experience, and it became basically the credit tag of that show of like, you get to do what? Well, in my day we had this and these were the rules. And watching multi-generational classic strong female performers in that way share both their great stories and their triumphs, but also their tribulations. It was a great learning lesson, and it was really valuable for me.
Was there a lot of like Me Too talk? You know what I mean? Like that was back in the day.
We actually did. We had a lot of that talk because our set was a place where you felt empowered, especially a lot of women felt empowered in that way, is they felt Roseanne was so strong that, and there were conversations that probably shouldn't have happened. I mean, Roseanne would ask questions that most people shouldn't ask, but she wanted to know, who's the best person you dated? Who was the best at this? Who was the best at that? What was their anatomy like? And you're just like, you're like I'm gonna walk away right now.
And that's the thing, like they never tried to shield you. Cause like, you hear like notoriously like Full House, like you hear about just, I'm using that as an example. It's my second Full House reference for no particular reason. Like it was an open set like that. Like Roseanne and John and Laurie were never like, okay, he's young and they were kind of young too. And nothing like that.
I think it's hard for people to understand when you get in that environment, you're around each other so much. It's kind of like being at home in essence,
Yeah.
right? Your parents sometimes try to have conversations without you knowing, but the reality is whatever's happening in your life happens in your life and happens around you. And in my case, I was small, and there were lots of times I was quiet and had big ears and listened closely and learned a lot. And there were a lot of times afterwards people were like, oh, we probably shouldn't have had that conversation in front of him. But in the moment, also, if you get a legend and they start talking, you don't want to stop them talking regardless of who's around, right? Like, you're getting information that they don't share with everybody. So I think you
Yeah.
just enjoyed that moment. And then afterwards you look over and you're like, oh, you probably shouldn't have heard that. And that's, for me, that's probably my life is I know a lot of things I shouldn't know and learned a lot of things early, but at the same time had a lot of healthy people around me to help me process that.
What about, like your parents supported you right from the beginning, but like, were you aware of like, okay, I'm making a ton of money, or I'm just assuming, for a child, it was a
That's
ton of money.
that's the
I,
big assumption in my case is that I made like tons of money. Like I laugh because I've had people who look me up on, I don't know, Google or whatever, and like I wish my net worth was half or a quarter of whatever it says.
they're never right, are they? They're
They're
never
never right.
right.
But what people don't understand is also whatever you make, right, in our business. So 10% goes to an agent. If you have a manager, that's 15%. So you're at 25% before anything happens. Most of what you make, you can't really defend. So you pay a high percentage of taxes. So before you even get the check, 50, 60% is gone. I mean, that's the beginning part. Then expenses or whatever. Do you have a publicist? Do you have a lawyer? Do you have any of these other things? It can go really fast and it's a very expensive world. It's why you see so many athletes and performers who end up not having a lot of money. If you're not working, it's easy for it to go out. In my case as a kid, my parents tried to make good investments. My parents tried to do the best they could, but a lot of it didn't work out. And what's funny, David, is for me, that almost is better that I didn't end up rich, that I didn't have a ton of money.
Really?
My car, I was in an accident over the weekend. That car was 20 plus years old and had 300,000 miles on it. Not because I just like was nostalgic, and it's because every time I wanted to go buy a new car, the kids needed something or the family needed something, or we had other things. And there's a whole period of my life, I was a high school baseball coach and worked a lot of jobs. I worked construction and warehouse and fugitive recovery and like all these really bizarre normal jobs. But it was great because what it made me do is stay hungry, and it gave me a life experience that now goes into my writing that I never would have had if I had just grown up in our business and I had gotten rich right away. Like, and I was a kid. I made the least amount, fittingly. And my parents came into this not knowing how much they should ask for. And so, I'm still at the point now where I'm just at the point now where I'm comfortable enough that I can really pursue the other things I want to do. But also I didn't get into this business for wealth, and it's not the reason I'm still here. Is my job is to make great projects. Money will come. The abundance is coming. And then I tell people this all the time, is my view on it is very simple. If it doesn't define you. It's a magnifying glass. If you're a kind person, you'll do really big, kind things. You'll give to a lot of people. You'll make a legacy of kindness. If you're a selfish person, it'll never be enough. And you'll constantly do things and step on people and use people. So, I think that I made it this far in my life without ever really being totally with ever having real abundance. I've had times where I was comfortable and could pursue what I want. And that's true freedom in being rich. But I've never been wealthy, and it never shaped my life or my kids, as you can see from the room you're looking at.
Well, no, I mean, it's a nice room, but I do think, right, like that's a misconception. I just think from a lot of people that are not anywhere near the business, I just think they lump everybody on TV or movies or music into one. Maybe I'm overstating that, but like, I
No,
just
I
think a
think
lot
you're
of
right.
people would be shocked to find 9 years
Yeah.
on like a major show.
Well, in the beginning, you don't make much as a kid.
Right.
Um,
I mean, that
but
doesn't shock me. I just think it would shock a lot of people.
yeah, and I think this is the thing. It's so hard. Even nowadays, the numbers are relative too, right? Like people aren't making the crazy money that a lot of people think. You hear, certain shows where people were making $1 million an episode, right?
Like
But that was one
Friends.
show on television, right? Like that wasn't every show. And a lot of times that's when a group of people actually does something really kind, is they came together as a collective and said, okay, we're not going to all negotiate separate so that they can minimize any of us.
Right.
We're going to all come together and team up. And, in my case, the time is coming for me to be more comfortable. But that's really, look, I'm building 2 charities and I'm looking at working in all of these other areas and have all these other projects. My job is to create access and representation and projects that help and move people. It's not for me to pad some bank account and run off. And again, all of my kids are grown, so they're making their own way in the world. My youngest is 18. So the reality is I'm paying for one in college, one going to college. Like, it's not hard to look and see where all of my investment is. But,
Yeah.
you know, I spent 20 years as a coach. I've invested in a lot of other kids and in a lot of small ways that people don't realize add up. But I invested, in my opinion, not judging anybody else's, what I thought mattered.
Right.
So, you know, again, I think I'm rich, just not in monetary form. And I probably will never totally be that way, because that's just not really my mode or function.
Well, that's the thing. Other than, you know, the George Clooney's or these you know, it's a working business where people go to work and, you know, I just think there's a lot of misconceptions, like, you know, the studio heads and the people behind, those are the ones that are really rich.
Yes.
An actor doesn't know. Yeah.
Make 10 times whatever the performer makes.
Right.
And the executives make probably 10 times what those people make. And here's what people have to realize in our business, not to get on a soapbox, but they say the average is about 6,000 to 8,000 people come here every month to be an actor. The average stay is 6 months. So most people struggle to be a working actor. The threshold to get insurance is, I want to say, something like 18 or 20,000. That means a lot of working actors are making $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 as a yearly income. That's the majority of our field and the working actors. This is not a get-rich-quick scheme, really, for most people. That's a great byproduct, and you see those select cases. But by and large, we are a union of hardworking people who are piecing together. I mean, on my podcast, I had a guy, Jesse, who does background work and does bits and pieces to piece together his year just to get to that number. And I think that's the part of our business that people don't understand. So I hope people kind of look at, you know, working actors, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000. There's a lot of people, there's a lot of actors I know sharing studio apartments just trying to make it work. And I worked construction and I built sets and I worked on the production side and I did a lot of terrible jobs to get back to where I wanted to be. I built back here, and I think I got a push by coming back with Roseanne and the Conners, but I was doing small things and building that way. I think people do a disservice because when they get to the point where people know them, no one talks about their lean days or those challenges.